only. But if you want things going, it has to be something bankable where people who invest in renewable companies are able to make money. And when they compare it with fossil fuel investments, so it shouldn't be just because of good omen. It has to be more than that.
When it comes to interaction with the government, it's extremely important that what government is offering to the private sector.
Moreover, a 1.5 degree centigrade compatible pathway would require that Pakistan reach full decarbonization of its power sector between 2036 to 2038.
So what is the local solution that can be developed here? And this is very important, I think. And the role of academia can play the part of the solution, can be part of the solution.
Count that there must be a structured accounting mechanism for the emissions. So how the companies have to account that all.
You know, a lot of these private sector institutions have actually exhausted the kind of solar space that they can build, and they're looking towards more wheeling mechanisms and things like policy incentives such as that to actually enable that transition.
Why they're not getting investment is a gap, and the gap is the feasibilities.
I think we should have a strong technology transfer in the renewable energy.
For an EV to be utilized by the general public, you have to build the infrastructure.
Also work on something called carbon negative energy generation.
We don't have a manufacturing unit as yet.
How many of us really think that 10 distribution companies are a going concern?
Just to make it more, the distribution companies more localized, I think that's an area that the government had kind of give them flexibility to get into power generation so that they can reduce their basket price.
Another thing that's very critical is to have a data repository where you actually put all the information together, and which would be the quantification of how to measure, having proper accounting.
For a long time, what has been missing from the Pakistan's development sector planning, like many other public policy problems, similarly in the energy sector, it has been the lack of evidence-based policy design.
We need to see COVID-19 as an opportunity to bring back the SDGs on track in a timely, efficient manner.
मौसमियाती तब्दीलियों को मद्देनज़र रखते हुए हम इस्लामाबाद को कैसे क्लीन, ग्रीन और साफ बना सकते हैं, इस बारे में आइए हम आपके साथ शेयर करते हैं एक रिपोर्ट। बढ़ती हुई कोरोना के बायस पाकिस्तान में लोग 40% से ज़्यादा गुर्बत का शिकार हो गए हैं। कोविड किस तरह से हमारे तालीम के निज़ाम को
on the decarbonization of cement sector. As we know that the industrial sector is the backbone of a modern economy, and it provides the energy and materials that are essential for the rapid growth. Globally, the industrial sector contributes 27.6% to the GDP, and it employs 23% of the labor force. However, on the other side, its emissions from the industries are increasing, and it is up to 30%, which is being contributed to the sector. Cement, concrete, iron, steel, oil, gas, chemicals, and mining put together to 80% of global industrial emissions, and hence are among the key sectors where emissions must be mitigated. For the reason that Pakistan is currently responsible for 7% of global and 6.5% of Pakistan's total CO2 emissions are from the energy sector. For this reason, the limited fiscal space from the industrial sector, especially in the backdrop of increasing energy prices, the low carbon transition discourse for the cement sector in Pakistan is hindered by the long investment cycles, low cost margins, inefficient technologies, and lack of financing opportunities to transform. Cement production is a multi-stage tailored process where decarbonization requires a socio-technical transition. On the technical front, it involves the transition to low carbon fuel, improvement in energy efficiency, clinker substitution, and carbon capture and storage and utilization. And while on the regulatory front, it requires market shifts, innovative practices, models, policies, and changes in demand side management. So this transformation requires a coordination among the stakeholders across all the sectors through which we can validate the process and develop a roadmap that could set us the possible pathway and recommend us actions and policies through which we can reach out a targeted point. With this, I would like to lay down some housekeeping rules before I am going further. I request all the speakers who have joined us online, so please keep their microphones off when they're not speaking to ensure a good audio quality. Speakers are encouraged to switch on their cameras, especially when they're speaking, if their network allows to do so. The session will be recorded and the video will be posted online. You are welcome to revisit the discussion later, and you all guys are invited for the questions from the audience and colleagues at the end of the session. The chat box is open for question and answer sessions, and speakers are requested to please limit their remarks for at least 7 minutes, and then the panel chair will conclude the session. Now I would like to request Dr. Sajid Amin, who is the Deputy Executive Director Research from STPI, for his welcoming remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Saleha. I think your remarks, maximum 7 minutes, not least 7 minutes. on a lighter note, just. Thank you so much. When Ubaid told me to have welcome remarks, I thought that I was be odd in the events, actually, a macroeconomist, sort of welcoming or opening a session on energy transition. But thanks to my work with Ubaid and the team over the last couple of years, that I've been very closely following this green energy or clean energy transition. And I think today's dialogue, but let me first apologize to our guests for the inconvenience on the roads, actually. Outside the Serena, it's really rushy, and I had to walk myself 10 minutes to reach to there. So we really apologize. But you know, things in Pakistan are not generally in control of anyone at this point of time. I think the beauty of the dialogues that this kind of dialogue is that it's really bringing up together the two key stakeholders, the public sector and the private sector. And I can see a very excellent set. I'm sure people will be reaching Dr. Sardar Muazzam, Managing Director, National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, Ministry of Science and Technology. We have also participants, Ministry of Climate Change, Punjab Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, Pakistan Environmental Trust, and most importantly, representation from Best Way Cement Limited, Oxford Policy Management, Center for Industries and Building Energy Audits, and our international experts, those who have joined us online. I really thank you, all of you. And really, you are all more expert than me on the cement sector. So I won't go much into the technical discussion, which Saleh has already also pointed a very good sort of stage setting. But I think today's dialogue and the similar dialogues are important for 2 to 3 key reasons. Number one, I think while Pakistan has a low contributions to global emissions, but these kind of discussions show that Pakistan is an equal partner of positive change on this global climate change action. And so this is the first point. I think that it showcases that while we are emitting low, but still we are this part of positive discussion and the change on climate action on net zero carbon and 1.5 degree target actually. But just before I close, I think in context of today's discussion, cement sector has a unique characteristics which pose serious challenges in terms of decarbonization. Particularly, I mean, maybe we have an easy solutions for energy mix based decarbonization that do change your energy carbonization and you will have, but in carbon sector, it's only 20% which can come from this energy mix. The rest of the 80% decarbonization depends on innovative technologies of carbon capture because most of it is coming from the calcination part of this process of cementing actually, and that will remain a key challenge. And I hope our experts will be deliberating on these issues. I'll just close with one last comment that we look forward to have some concrete proposals, recommendations coming on the later part, the second part of the innovative technologies to carbon capture in this process of making cement. So that will be very critical. And I'll just close with, there can be 2 types of discussions. The one is the very ambitious discussion that comes that we have to do it every cost. But I think our colleagues, those who are here, those who are experts, will also be bringing realistic checks, also reality checks as well, that how ready is cement sector of Pakistan in this scenario, in this crisis, where even overall energy mix is shifting back to coal again. Due to the Ukraine war, there are global shift on the fossil fuels. And in this context, what can be done to go to net zero carbon, that is, I think, the most critical question at this point of time. I once again thank you, all of the participants, those who have joined, the team, Obed, and all others for arranging this session. And I sit here as a listener. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an enlightened remarks. And you really touched upon the important points like need for the innovative technologies. And it must be a challenge for the Pakistan cement sector to really look into the opportunities that could be best suited in the local context. With this, I would move forward to Mr. Ubaidur Rahman Zia. He is the Senior Research Associate at STPI and for the agenda setting presentation. Over to you, Ubaid.
Jay, thank you so much, Saleha, and all of the distinguished speakers who joined us both in person as well as online. So I'll just briefly give a very short overview of what STPI is actually aiming to do under its Clean Energy Transition Program and what we have recently just developed. So I'm just going to highlight these 2 reports which we just recently conducted. One was the launch of the SDG 7 roadmap for Pakistan, which again puts a very significant focus on how important energy efficiency and decarbonization is for Pakistan to achieve its SDG 7 goals. And secondly is a white paper which we actually developed on synergizing the climate ambitions, a blueprint for achieving NDCs through private sector engagement in Pakistan. And that was actually conducted in collaboration with overseas investors, chambers of commerce and industry. So that was very holistic picture which we actually tried to get by getting into understanding the challenges which the whole industrial sector is facing, because just like I think Dr. Sajid also mentioned that for industries, it's mainly the what makes the economic case. Although, again, so I think the just to set the problem statement, industrial sector of Pakistan actually constitutes a share of almost 32% in total, almost 232 metric ton CO2 emissions, which are coming from the overall energy sector. And I'll also be showing you a mix of this. But if we look at its subdivision or its constitution, then the construction materials, which is mainly the cement and the brick kilns, they actually account for almost 50% of these total emissions, which are coming from the industrial sector. So, okay, these are two of the figures. On the top left, we actually shows that what is currently the energy mix of the industrial sector. So if we just look at the very recent figures of 2021, the use of coal accounts for almost 51.4% of total energy consumption in industrial sector. And if we actually look over the past trend, then since 2016, the consumption of coal industry has actually increased with an annual compound growth rate of over 20%. And on the bottom figure, this actually shows that what's actually the contribution or constitutions within the industrial sector. So if we just have a look at it, then cement actually constitutes a share of almost 36% coal that is used in the overall industrial sector. And if I just give a very brief what Pakistan's nationally determined contributions coal, it's that the coal import in Pakistan has actually improved up by 5-fold in the last 5 years, primarily for the industrial purposes, of which the cement sector is actually constituting a 65% of the overall share. So again, the reason which we initially highlighted that particularly the emissions are actually driving pretty much by very high utilization of coal. But again, that links to the very energy intensity requirements of the cement sector. They're all in the calcination process. So that's something which has to be there, but we need to understand how to make an economic case going further. So these are actually what I'm just trying to show what we actually started doing with under recent reports. It's that this is actually the national determined contributions of Pakistan, where Pakistan has actually proposed that based upon its under its NDCs, it is actually aiming to limit its emissions by 50% by 2030, depending upon the availability of international finance. So in our collaboration with OICCI, we actually developed these different potential pathways on how actually the different pathways are to be realized, whether we talk about the different scenarios of mentioned under the NDCs, as well as net zero targets or the 1.5 or 2 degree scenarios. So I think I'll just be briefly highlighting one statement from this is that under the currently announced measures in the industrial sector of Pakistan, there is a potential to reach emission reductions of 9%, which as if we look at the amount that is required to meet a 2 degree scenario, that currently is a bit low. Hamza, next. So yeah, okay. So with all those industries, we actually develop one potential pathway of reaching the net zero targets, which indicates that for Pakistan's industrial sector to reach net zero by 2050, the cement sector actually has to reduce its emissions by at least 53% by 2030. So this actually shows, I mean, again, just to highlight again that this is actually one of the scenario of the very possible scenarios which can be developed over here. So this is actually something which we needs to be handled as. So again, just talking about what can be actually done to reduce the sectoral emissions, we actually have to very briefly see where the emissions are generally coming from. So if we simply just divide our overall emissions, so there are mainly three key areas. One is the direct emissions that are generally coming from the own assets of these industries. The second one is the indirect emissions, which are coming from the purchase sources. And the third one is where we actually combine the overall value chain to see what's transportation, waste, energy, and fuel are consuming. So next. Yes, so this is actually a matrix which actually dictates or highlights the key results which were actually coming out from those studies, that there are particularly 4 key areas. One is actually you have to reduce your own emissions, reduce your value chain emissions, integrate climate and business strategy, and influence climate actions at sectoral level. So again, this defines some of the key actions which can be actually implemented, that initially we actually have to set a target which actually defines the emission reductions, and then you need to actually integrate some positive climate impact and vision and mission value propositions, and you have to actually take some key implementable actions over here. So again, yeah, these are all completely available. We can talk about them a lot of in details as well. So what as of now we're doing at the currently for the cement sector particularly is a twofold analysis. One is where we actually trying to analyze the value chain analysis of the cement sector, where we're actually defining that, or fine, when we talk about the whole cement sector, Dr. Sajid also highlighted that calcination is actually one of the very key areas where you need to see what the possibilities are. But again, at the same time, we need to also link it with all the SMEs that are overall linked to this whole chain, where what potential opportunities do they exist at the informal sector as well. And the second fold is how those overall potential levers, which we identified, also Dr. Sajid talked about them, the use of carbon capturing technologies, energy efficiency is one of the very key aspects. Replacements of clinkers and other substitution materials are also there. So what key levers are there currently for the decarbonization of the industrial sector? And particularly from those key levers, we're actually trying to analyze how do you actually link all this with Pakistan's NDCs or the net zero targets. And particularly, and the most important thing is that what is actually going to be the cost of this whole transition? Because again, to be very open, just like I initially highlighted, that it has to be an economic case for all, because if we just talk about the current scenario which we're also facing, so this does appear that it's going to have a high cost. But I think we do have Talha Saab here as well, will be highlighting this aspect, I guess, as well. So this is particularly what we're aiming to do, and just linking it with this dialogue. So I'll just leave it over here, that what we're trying to discuss over here is to understand what opportunities and challenges for this transformation does exist, what could be the potential financing needs, and how to frame the decarbonization pathways. And again, finally, to benchmark the mitigation strategies of Pakistan's cement sector with best practices and globally identified decarbonization levers. So with this, I'll hand it back to Saleha. So please, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ubaid, for the wonderful presentation and setting the stage for the further discussion. Now I would like to open the floor for the panel discussion. Firstly, I would like to ask the question to Mr. Syed Fawad Hussain Shah, who is the Senior Assistant Manager, Center for Industrial and Building Energy Audits. Sir, since you are doing a study on industrial decarbonization, and one of the key sector which you have touched upon is the cement sector of Pakistan. So what type of technological intervention does Pakistan need, and what are the barriers to adopt these technologies you have like figured out and in Pakistan? So over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. So as Saleha mentioned, that we are currently conducting a World Bank funded study, which is basically on industrial decarbonization, for which we have selected 5 carbon and energy intensive sectors, and cement is one of them. So before mentioning some of the technologies that are existing, or some of them which are emerging technologies for the cement sector, I would like to share some of the key insights from the current site visits of some sample cement sector from Pakistan industry. So we found that the overall emission from the cement, local cement industry, almost 45% comes from the energy, while 55% comes from the process emissions. When we benchmark the performance of the sample industries, and according to thermal efficiency benchmarking, the global average is almost 3.4 to 3.5 gigajoule per ton of clinker, while the sample plants had 3.9 gigajoule per ton of clinker. And the NZE target is almost 3.2 gigajoule per ton of clinker. When we benchmark the electrical efficiency of the sample plants, the global average was 100 kilowatt hours per ton of cement, while the sample plant had the intensity of 90 kilowatt hours per ton of clinker, and the NZE target is 84 kilowatt hours per ton of cement. And when we benchmark the emission intensity of the sample plants, the global average was 0.6 ton of CO2 per ton of cement, while the sample plants had 0.79 ton of CO2 per ton of clinker, which is a bit higher than the global average. And there are few reasons for that. The first reason is that the nominal clinker to cement ratio is 0.95 in Pakistan, while the global average is 0.72. And the lowest clinker to cement ratio is in China, which have 0.69. and NZE target is 0.62 for 2050. So the second reason is that globally the share of coal is almost 80%, 70%, while in Pakistan's sample plants, the share of coal in the overall energy was 85%. This is also the reason for the higher carbon intensity of cement. Another reason is that globally the share of biomass is almost 12%, while this ratio is almost percentage is almost 16% for Europe, while for sample plants in Pakistan, the share of biomass and waste was very little, that is 0.02% of the primary energy. Similarly, renewable energy has 0.002% of the primary energy consumption. So these were some reasons for the higher carbon intensity. When we talk about energy efficiency, most of the cement plants had already installed energy efficient technologies. For example, they have installed dry kilns, rotary kilns. They have already installed the grate coolers, and they have already installed the replaced the ball mills with vertical roller mills. They have installed the pneumatic transport system with mechanical transport system. So there is a very little gap for energy efficiency. Instead, none of the sample plants had installed ORC system, which is suitable for low heat content heat that is produced in the air cooler. So besides energy efficiency, most of the plants have already installed waste heat recovery systems on the air cooler and the preheater sides, and they are already producing almost 25% of their electricity demand. And when we talk about renewable energy, one of the plants had already installed 20 megawatt of solar plant, but that 20 megawatt solar plant, which were producing almost 20 gigawatt hours per year in 2021, which makes almost 11% of their electricity demand and almost 1.1% of their primary energy mix, which is very little. So besides energy efficiency, some of the plants had already conducted carbon capturing feasibility studies for carbon capturing and storage technologies, but they said that the cost of this technology is almost equal to the capital cost of a lone cement plant. So it is very impossible without support of donor agencies for the pilot projects or government support. Similarly, they also mentioned that people don't accept cement with lower clinker to cement ratio. There is very little awareness regarding that factor, and there is very little awareness regarding green cement in the Pakistan. Similarly, if we look at the building codes of Pakistan, they mentioned that we should use ordinary Portland cement, and this needs to be updated with some alternate cement chemistries so that the contractor and all other are aware about that. So if we talk about the technologies, there are some existing technologies and there are some emerging technologies. Existing technologies include increasing share of biomass in the fuel mix, and similarly increasing electrical efficiency by installing VFDs on the fans and motors and compressors. Similarly, installing single pipe conveyor system, and there are other energy efficient technologies. And emerging side, there is a potential for electrification of kiln, which can remove the energy side emission. There is also potential for green hydrogen, but both of these technologies are very low at the technology readiness level. For example, green hydrogen for cement sector is at technology readiness level of 6. Similarly, electric kiln is at technology readiness level of 5. But there is a coal broke technology, which is the first of these electrified kiln for cement sector, which can produce almost 1700 degrees C using green electricity. But the barrier is that we cannot provide cost-effective green electricity to the cement sector for now, which is not a viable solution now. Similarly, there are alternate cement chemistries all around the world which can provide almost up to 70% emission reduction. But the barriers are that either those alternate materials are available locally or not. Similarly, the barrier is that I mentioned that there is a lack of awareness regarding alternate cement chemistry, and people don't accept alternate cements. Similarly, carbon capture technologies are already installed on pilot stage globally, and the carbon cure technologies which capture carbon and then utilize in the curing of concrete is already installed in more than 100 plants in the North America. Similarly, other carbon capturing technologies are installed, but they are most of them are pilot stage, and only one amine-based technology is commercialized, and almost capacity of 50,000 ton of CO2 capturing capacity plant is installed in China. And India also planned that they will install in almost coming 5 years largest carbon capturing plant of almost 1 lakh CO2 emission capturing per year. So these are some existing and emerging options for the cement sector that we found in the current study. And that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting the potential avenues and challenges which the industry is currently facing in terms of technologies, in terms of cost effectiveness, and all that. With this, I wanted to move further and wanted to explore more regulatory challenges which is being faced by the cement industry. I would like to ask a question to Mr. Farooq Ahmed, who is the head of Environment Bestway Cement Limited and All Pakistan Cement Manufacturing Association. So, sir, what are the key financial and regulatory challenges being faced by the cement sector of Pakistan to transition towards a comparatively more environmental sustainable pathway, and how the cement sector could ensure the sustainability in the value chain process and products? So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me and giving us this platform, because a lot of times all of these climate change discussions are, sorry to say, but they are utopian discussions without involving the key factors or the key players who are going to actually implement this, who are going to bear the cost. And whatever cost is borne by the industry is ultimately passed on to the end consumer. So whatever discussion that we do or the lofty targets that we set, we need to realize that Pakistan is an underdeveloped country. The economic challenges are not withheld from anyone. So these are some of the things that we need to have, as a precursor to all of this discussion. Like my friend here, Mr. Fawad, mentioned about the cement industry. So I would like to clarify about Bestway. Waste heat recovery power plants were introduced for the first time. It was at that time in 2009 an experimental technology, and we were the first ones to do it. And the effort was recognized by the UNFCCC, and we had also submitted a few reports under their Clean Development Mechanism program. So right now, Bestway's waste heat recovery power plants are producing around 65 megawatts. Then, continuing in the same path, we were not the first ones in the cement industry to introduce solar power plants, but currently our installed capacity of 70 megawatts is the largest in the cement industry, and I think it's also the largest in the region in terms of cement industry. And our targets is in the next 6 months, depending on the import issues and the dollar issues. So I think we will be crossing the 100 megawatts barrier, and we are aiming to be installing around 120 to 30 megawatts within the next 6 months, allowing different circumstances. So with that, the total power footprint of Bestway would be 50% covered by green energy. So that was something that we could do. That was something that we've been doing as a conscious effort since our inception in 1998. And Bestway has always been at the forefront of introducing new ideas and then other companies can follow our path. If you talk about the challenges, the first and foremost challenge is that the technologies touched upon by Fawad Saab, most of them, they are in the earliest stages of implementation or development. The carbon capture, the only one in Europe is, I think, in one of the Norwegian plants. And I think the capacity for annual carbon capture is around 30 to 40,000 tons of CO2 per year. So which is negligible if you consider, like if you compare it with the emissions from an ordinary Portland cement plant in Pakistan, or like Bestway, we are almost the second largest cement producer in Pakistan. So millions of tons of CO2 are released every year due to cement production in Pakistan. It is required for a developing country. So those experimental technologies may take another decade or two to reach at the stage of maturity, and then maybe we can implement it in Pakistan. So the only avenue possible for us is reduction in the carbon footprint through our energy demands, and we are doing that. The other thing is that if the government can, facilitate companies like Bestway and other companies who are willing to take this deep dive into these renewable energies and alternate energies, but if they can facilitate us in terms of import, facilitations, in terms of tax exemptions. So these kind of incentives will go a long way in encouraging Bestway and other industry players to further explore the possibilities, because right now we are in a really bad situation in terms of the economic situation in the country, and we are part of the same country and the same economy. So to expect any industry, not only the cement industry, at this moment in time to go for all these good to do things, or, all these things which are being implemented in the developed countries, it would be an unrealistic approach. And if we are not given all these facilitations, tax exemptions, so I don't think that a lot of these goals would be achieved, which the country has, committed in the previous COP meetings. So other things like when we go for environmental approvals to the regulatory authorities, it takes a very long time. The regulatory time should be 90 to 120 days. It takes months upon months. And then there are several hiccups, which will always which is going to bother the people who are going to invest these huge amounts of money. So if those sectors, like the regulatory bodies and the other associated government functionaries who are responsible for facilitating us, giving us NOCs, and all these kind of things. So we are facing them on a day-to-day basis. We are recently erecting 2 new plants, one in Miyawali and line 2 in Hattar. And we have been facing similar problems in terms of getting regulatory approvals, getting NOCs. And so there is a lot of red tapeism that needs to be get rid of. So that one window operation promises that we have been getting for so many decades, if that can be implemented, then a lot of things can be streamlined. The other thing is that you also touched upon was the alternate energy. So if I talk about Bestway, we have gone for bagasse, we have gone for the leather waste, we have gone for even, the wood-based, and then TDF. So when we were going for tire-derived fuel, it took us, I think, more than 2 years to convince the EPA that tire-derived, that the cement industry is the only industry in Pakistan or around the world which has the necessary infrastructure to efficiently burn the TDF, and we can get rid of the TDF because tire-derived fuel will be available. And if it's not used by industries like cement, it's always going to go to the unregulated sector, and that is going to create more problems than solving any. So these are some of the challenges we are facing right now. I can go on for another hour or so, but I think for the scope of today's discussion, I think this is where I put my point of view for discussion, and hopefully we can get some good answers in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Of course, there are a lot of challenges regarding the finances and regulatory challenges, which could facilitate the process in the cement industry. Now, I would like to move further, and I would like to ask question to Mr. Talha Khan, who is the Executive Director, Pakistan Environmental Trust. Sir, you have heard the regulatory challenges financial challenges. So since PET has done some work on the textile sector, so how do you see, what are the lessons learned from the textile sector in setting up the net zero targets that can be applied for the cement sector as well? So over to you, Salman.
Thanks a lot, Salia. Just a quick sort of building on what the introduction you made, and for the context of the audience as well. One of the things that PET is doing is we're convening the Net Zero Pakistan Coalition, in which textile sector is the primary sector so far. It's a sector agnostic coalition, but 26 of the leading textile companies have made net zero commitment and joined that program, under which we're building their capabilities, we're raising finance and a bunch of other things to help achieve that net zero ambition. So I just want to set the framing over there. I think I completely agree with what Farooq Saab and Fawaz Saab was saying. At the face of it, Pakistani cement sector making a net zero ambition is a utopian dream right now. I don't think it's possible at this point. The reason why, I'll build on to the lessons learned from textile sector as well. The reason why textile sector made that ambition and what are they doing about it, and why it's relevant for cement and why not it's relevant for cement. There are three primary reasons that we've seen for any green premium product to grow and scale, or for any company or any business to make some of these commitments. One of them is the consumer behavior. So whether the customers are asking for it or not. In cement, no customer is asking for it in Pakistan. Export market, primarily if you look at Pakistan, and I think Farooq can probably speak about that in more detail. Our primary export markets are Sri Lanka, India, and Afghanistan, as far as I understand. None of those countries are actually at this point in time vigorous about green cement or anything like that. The second driver are the regulatory pressure or the incentives, which I think we touched upon as well. There are incentives at this point for cement to do it. There are incentives and subsidies for textile sector, but not at that scale for cement sector. So there is no carrot, and neither there is any stick for cement to go on that journey. And then the third thing is the pressure from the investors for investing money of it in the business. Most of our investors in these businesses in Pakistan, cement and beyond cement, are family-owned businesses. So the core factor they look at is return on equity investment. That's the number that they look at. If you look at some of the key companies in India who made these commitments, Ultratech, Dalmia Cement, a bunch of others, a number of them have foreign investors investing in them, the likes of BlackRock and others. That money comes with not just the return on equity, but also the impact that is driven as well. That doesn't exist. The foreign capital doesn't exist in our businesses to create any incentive or any push. That's the context in which our cement sector is working. On top of that, our business environment itself is it's extremely fluctuating and very risky as well. So that taking any sort of risky decision within this context becomes all the more difficult. Having said that, the reason why textile sector made these and some of those lessons learned that we can bring to cement context as well. So textile sector did it because 61% of our exports are from textile sector. And most of the major global fashion brands have made that net zero commitment. So just being able to show that commitment and tell the world about the North Star that we're going for that just creates a lot more positive goodwill for that sector within Pakistan and outside as well. Just by making this commitment and coming together as textiles manufacturers under a single platform that gave them the brand equity to now engage with some of the global fashion brands that never engaged with our textile sector at a sector level. So for example, through this platform of bringing these 26 companies together, we're engaging global brands like Levi's, Adidas, Target, some of those major brands who primarily source from Bangladesh and Vietnam, and trying to get them excited about Pakistan as well, that in Pakistan, it's not just one company. It's not just one company, but actually, I'm sorry about that. It's not just one company, but actually the whole sector that you can scale your things on. This is something that we could probably replicate for cement sector as well. Even in the absence of any sort of lofty ambition or targets, the cement sector through any platform tries to start sharing knowledge and ideas around, how can we elevate the sector overall? That could be an exciting proposition. I'm sure they're already doing a bit of that, but building on that would be great with that kind of net zero goal and ambition. The second thing that happened in textile sector is that we started measuring their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So as a sector level right now, the work that you guys have done is really, really useful and helpful from a top-down perspective, but doing a bottom-up of how much emissions are coming from scope 1, 2, and 3, and defining them with science-based targets methodology, which is the globally accepted methodology across the world when it comes to carbon emissions. will help you align your numbers with the rest of the world as well, and give the world the signal that we're sort of speaking the same language as they're speaking. That is the stuff that textile sector is currently doing. And the interesting thing that happened in textile sector was that since these 26 companies had come together with their net zero ambition, these companies who are ruthless competitors in the market actually come together every month now for a day to openly discuss ideas and best practices on how to measure these emissions. So that has created that knowledge sharing across the sector that is proving to be quite helpful. I think the third thing, purely from a policy perspective, that has happened, and I think this is something which we're doing currently in Pakistan, but we need to learn from what India is doing right now as well, is the use of policy tools like renewable energy certificates. So through this platform, now in Pakistan, we are issuing those renewable energy certificates that allow us to offset scope 2 emissions, even if we're not able to get to 100% renewable energy in our scope 2. So if, like Bestway Cement, they've gone to 50% through their own installation and the captive power they have. But beyond that, they can also offset the rest of the emissions by buying those certificates. On the incentive side, the thing that hasn't happened in Pakistan, but I think we should actively think about, is in India, they've got this perform, achieve, and trade policy, which basically, first of all, through one of their climate action policies, they enforce the companies to start setting these targets of emission reduction. And companies that actually overachieve those targets, they give them certificates for the numbers that go beyond the target, and these companies can trade those certificates with each other in the market. That is an incentive tool that has been introduced in India. I think it can easily be introduced in Pakistan as well, specifically for companies like Bestway and the others who are taking the right measures to actually, and those targets don't need to be, I mean, those targets are defined in line with discussions with the private sector, not by the government in isolation from the private sector, so that the private sector buys into those targets and agrees to meet those targets. And then you can create that tool and mechanism to incentivize as well. And the last point I'll make, and then I'll pause, is I think the one thing that we really need to unlock, which, I mean, textile sector is trying to do, and it's literally something that it amazes me that we're kind of trying to rearrange chairs on a Titanic deck when the ship is literally sinking, is the power purchasing policy. And I know it's a very complicated thing to do, but in the absence of that, we cannot unlock our energy problems without having a free market for power purchasing in Pakistan. And without that, what will happen in the near future, which cement sector is not going to be hampered by that much because most of the market is local for cement, but our textile sector will be heavily hampered because even with all the subsidies that we've given to textile sector, carbon taxes will come into play. And our products will become uncompetitive because we will be driving a lot of our energy from coal. So on one side, we're trying to use coal to generate electricity because of the economic reasons, of course. But on the other side, in the absence of power purchasing, we are not giving any doorway for export markets to actually buy green energy as well. So I think that is one thing we need to unlock. It will open up opportunities for both cement, textile, as well as many other sectors. So that's it for myself.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting such an important point like that we need a tier-based approach for the GHG emissions. We need policy tools for certificates and incentives from the public sector, from the government. And you build upon a very good point for the developing countries as well. To know more about the developing countries context, I wanted to ask a question from the Mr. Deepak Krishnan, who is the Associate Director from World Resource Institute. So, sir, what are some of the best policy and technological interventions for the decarbonization in the cement sector adapted across the developing countries, particularly Asia, including India, China, and how these countries adopt transition in their long-term decarbonization strategies that would prospect it, particularly around the job creation, women participation in this transition. Over to you, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Saleha. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, SDPI, for inviting me to this discussion. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Great. Sure. Thank you. So a lot of questions I think Mr. Talakan already covered in his intervention, particularly on the policy fronts that India especially is taking. But overall, I would summarize by saying that the cement sector across the developing world has captured the low-hanging fruit. That I think from what Sir Farooq Ahmad mentioned, what Mr. Fawad Hussain mentioned, there is a low-hanging fruit in terms of equipment energy efficiency, some amount of process energy efficiency. I think largely those have been captured, and whatever additional things are going to be done is going only to be incremental. The real test is now in the fuel switching, and even over here we heard examples of biomass-based fuel alternatives coming in. The next big frontier is expected to be green hydrogen, but of course that is still some time away. The building on this pyramid of energy efficiency, fuel substitution, I think the next bigger challenge would then be the alternate material reuse, and this is where you can bring in ideas related to circularity across different industries. For example, alternatives to clinker, like in the form of fly ash, which would mitigate some of the pollution concerns from thermal power plants. And again, given the resurgence of king coal, as some folks would mention, with increasing coal usage, how do we also ensure that pollution then doesn't start to spike up? I think that can be an alternative for the alternate materials instead of clinker. And the last, which would sit at the apex of this pyramid, is the new technologies which currently are in either a demonstration stage or are very expensive, like CCUS. And I think that's the progression in pyramidal progression as I would see it. In terms of what the industry is doing and as well as what governments are doing, I think they are fairly aligned. Industry, for instance, has started signing up to global initiatives like the Renewable Energy 100. Like, for example, Dalmia Cement has signed up to power all their operations by renewable energy, 100% renewable energy, I think by 2040, if I'm not wrong. But renewable energy is only part of the solution. Again, clearly when it comes to materials and alternate fuel usage, that is where the governmental support and possibly even the international community support in terms of lowering these technology costs, enabling improved access to finance. That's something we have not seen flowing significantly. But of course, speaking from, for example, from the government of India's recent announcements, which also were supported in yesterday's budget, for example, the National Green Hydrogen Mission, with about 19,700 crores of outlay for production of green hydrogen within the country. Some portion of that can actually come in to decarbonize the cement sector. That is one intervention that I think could be considered. Mr. Tahakan spoke about the renewable energy certificates as well as the Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme. Of course, the REC market has seen its share of ups and downs with large volumes, the enforceability being the major concern, which has led to large volumes of these RECs remaining unsold and not proving to be very effective. But it has seen some revival, and typically with the financial year also coming close to an end, we might see an uptick in the procurement of REC. So definitely that is one other way. PAT, for cement sector has especially been successful, and the initial. We have seen the PAT scheme run across different cycles. We are right now in the 6th cycle. So as Mr. Talakan mentioned, it's about the government and the industry working together, setting these targets that need to be achieved. There is a separate batch of trained auditors who come in and evaluate this performance over an agreed upon time period and then issue those energy saving certificates. The first 2 cycles really saw significantly high target realization. For example, in a first cycle, the target was overachieved by about 81%. And in second cycle, it came to about 48%. And since then, the differences have started to narrow. So that's also a learning for the country in terms of how target setting can be stringent, and getting this balance is very difficult. You make it too easy, then you'll see figures like 81% overachievement, 50% overachievement. But if you make it too difficult, then industry faces a significant crunch as far as operations are concerned. A third alternative on the electricity side that has seen some amount of traction is the green tariffs, where right now India has an open access arrangement where as a cement industry or any other industry, I can contract separately with a solar or a wind developer and get that much share of electricity into my mix. But this essentially means that these companies move out of the distribution companies service, and there is a principle of cross subsidy also involved here. So industrial and commercial users pay typically 7 to 9 rupees on an average, versus a residential person who pays about 4 to 6 on an average. So that amount of cross subsidy is lost as the industry moves out of the DISCOM's network. So to offset that, there is a new tariff mechanism called green tariffs that have been introduced in some states, where the DISCOM offers this tariff and says that whatever electricity you consume by switching to this, it's deemed as green. So this helps, particularly if the market doesn't allow you to go beyond a certain limit to procure renewable energy, etc. But the challenge here is getting the design right again. Right now, it's all a premium of 50 paise or 60 paise, depending on what the state regulators decide. And naturally, that has meant that there is no incentive for the industry to go for it, when in an open market, they can get solar at rates much lower than what they are currently consuming from the distribution licensee. So that is again a policy that can be tried out, but it still needs a significant amount of rework. And as far as China is concerned, again, I would say if we look at the average numbers that Mr. Fawad Hussain put out, yes, they would definitely be in the top 10% of the world. But even over in China, if as per latest Rocky Mountain Institute report, even until 2030, their main focus is going to be demand reduction, efficiency improvement. And this demand reduction also links to design practices in the urban areas, where through better building design, you reduce the quantity of cement that is needed maybe per a unit of construction. So that's going to be their focus till 2030. Till 2040, since then, alternative fuels and some amount of CCUS along with demand reduction would continue to work together. And with 2040 to 50, alternative fuels and CCUS are expected to play a larger role. And it's only in 2050-60 that they estimate that new alternative production technologies such as hydrogen is going to come in and play a significant role. So a lot of moving parts is what I would say. And definitely, this is where learnings across countries, across industry. I'm sure that just like we have national cement associations, for instance, there would also be international bodies to coordinate. And looking at the larger picture, this is where I would think that governments should come together, taking advantage of the regional, global groupings, which we are also seeing, and try to exchange all these knowledge such that best practices elsewhere can also be learned and adopted. Now, on the second aspect about how can this be designed, how can these be used to design just transitions to see how job creation, upgradation, social justice and gender equality also come in. There are different layers again to the just transitions conversation that we are seeing. A lot of focus definitely is on what happens in the coal production or the thermal power plant areas. But increasingly, through our experience on the ground, we are also finding that in the MSME sector, there is some interest in understanding a lot of this, particularly in textiles and automotive is where we have not seen that much of attraction in the cement sector in India. But auto sector, definitely because of the entry of electric vehicles and the expected disappearance of a large section of the supply chain, there is a definite interest in reskilling. I think that's the primary demand that is coming across from people we are speaking to. When it comes to textile, again, we are seeing that, again, it is MSME driven because a lot of these companies like H&M, Puma, for them, the scope 3 emissions is much greater than their scope 1 and scope 2. So again, over there, through green interventions, can this enable more women participation in the workforce? Does it help reduce pollution within the workspace? Because if, for example, if thermal boilers are replaced with solar powered boilers. So again, I would say it's early days for the cement industry, and given the capital intensity and the fact that significantly it's a scope 1 problem. Please correct me if I'm wrong on this. And the large industries have this significantly under the control. I would say there is a lesser element of this, but to the extent the MSMEs are involved and in their processes, we can help feed this green technologies and resultant advantages. The just transitions will also progress, but it's important to develop this in consultation with them so that it doesn't become a sort of a forced intervention, which would make it difficult for people to adopt, and start thinking about this right from day one. It shouldn't be like, there are green mandates today, so we start doing it and then think of there's a just energy transition. It needs to be baked into the planning earlier. So thank you. I'll stop my intervention right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You really touched upon the important aspects of technological interventions which currently the developing world is using, and initiatives like the RE certificates, cross subsidies, and green tariffs. Now, to move further, I wanted to build a context on the developed countries as well. So I would like to get opinion from Mr. Mahmood Abul Naga, who is the Solutions Fellow, Center for Climate and Energy Solutions. So, sir, what are the key technological innovations such as carbon capture, use and storage, and other levers that are supporting the decarbonization of the cement sector in the developed countries? And what are the policy and financial tools that can be adopted to bridge the gap for the developing countries such as Pakistan? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Salaha, and thank you for all the speakers and for the Sustainable Development Policy Institute for the invitation. You can all hear me well, right? Perfect. So yeah, just to build on what have been said, like one of the main challenges for the cement is the emission profile from that sector. So when we talk about the cement, as like others mentioned, like roughly 65% is coming from the calcination, 35% is coming from the fossil fuel based heat. So that limits the options for decarbonization to, like when we talk about fuel switching or decarbonization of the energy coming to this industry, and makes how we reduce the emissions from the calcination process is the bigger challenge and the most critical in order to decarbonize the industry. So one option is for the cement industry is basically to burn the fuel in a mixture of oxygen and flue gas stream, but this creates another problem because that will include sealing a rotating hot kiln. So that's an issue. That's impractical. It would be very impractical. Be very challenging. The other way is to isolate the carbon dioxide coming from the calcination process and separate it from the carbon dioxide that's coming from the heat. Why are we doing that? the cost of the carbon capture process becomes high when the concentration of the CO2 in the flue gas becomes low. So here we have two sources of CO2 in the process. The CO2 coming from the limestone is relatively pure, so it's easier to capture, lower cost to capture, because it mainly just needs like some degree of dehydration. But on the other hand, the CO2 emissions coming from the heat, like the fossil-based heat, is not as pure, which means it's more expensive to capture it because it needs further processing. So the separation, when we achieve this kind of separation between the two streams, you increase the concentration of the CO2, and then the capture itself becomes more, starts to make more economic sense, basically. Another approach, and I think Mr. Rebecca talked a little bit about that, is the substitution of certain elements in the process, like whether reduce the amount of cement in order to make concrete, reduce it by like some kind of fly ash or blast furnace slag or other ingredients that reduce the overall footprint of the process. Other approaches that have been tried in different countries, I think the example was in Japan, is that they use a byproduct of slacked lime, basically, that absorbs carbon dioxide, and it shows remarkable reduction compared to the ordinary concrete. The other field in the carbon capture world that's getting a lot of attention lately is the optimization of carbon capture in concrete, because basically what you do is that you use dilute carbon dioxide from the flue gas streams and mineralize it into a precast low carbon concrete component. This process, for example, using like a calcium hydroxide, or which has like really high affinity for carbon dioxide, accelerate the carbonation reaction and requires relatively low energy. And you also don't need a very high pure stream of CO2. These different factors reduce the overall cost of the process. Again, there is no easy solution for decarbonizing the cement sector. And when we talk about technologies that are being developed now, are at a certain scale now, it doesn't mean that all the countries need to adopt these technologies right now. Like for sure, like the room's full of experts in Pakistan, they know the local condition better than I do, and they know when this solution would make sense for the Pakistan case. But these are the options that seems viable for such hard to abate sector, because even if we power the cement plant with 100% clean energy, that's still nothing compared to the overall emission profile coming from the plant, because energy here is not the main issue that we are concerned about. And that's why also the issue of concentration of CO2 and the source of CO2, like over the last couple of decades, most of the carbon capture projects that we have seen, at least in the US, were mainly focused in three sectors: biofuels, natural gas processing, ethanol fermentation. What's common between these three sectors? All of them have high purity of CO2 in the flue gas streams, which means they have the lowest cost to capture the carbon. And that will take me to the second part of your question around the mechanism or the policy that support these technologies. Why these three sectors were supported? Because the main vehicle, the main support or policy lever for carbon capture technologies was a tax credit code known as the 45Q tax credit. That tax credit was at the level of $50 per ton. At $50 per ton, per ton of CO2, only these sectors were able to break even and somehow make some profit. So for them, it made sense. Other sectors that even had relatively good opportunity to benefit from the tax credit, they didn't match, or their economics, they didn't match that level, and they couldn't benefit from the tax credit. But now this has changed. Like after the enactment of the Inflation Reduction Act last year, the level of the 45Q tax credit increased from $50 per ton to $85 per ton CO2. So now we have seen more interest from industries, including the cement industry, that are maybe at that level we can benefit from the tax credit. The other vehicle that's also really important when countries or governments or companies think about how to decarbonize the cement sector is procurement programs. In almost every country, the largest purchasing power, the largest procurement power lies with the government. When the government sends a clear signal that we have a new procurement program, like previous speaker were talking about how there is no clear signal in the market that this low carbon concrete or low carbon cement people would buy it, people would use it in building the different buildings in the country. Such procurement program would send this signal. And that's why it's really important when you have the government supporting low carbon cement, low carbon concrete, and willing to buy that and willing to send the signal for the market. So also private investor will jump in because now they have the certainty that someone is willing to buy this low carbon product. That's another important factor. One of the uncertainties around low carbon concrete that still we need to resolve it is the issue of life cycle analysis emissions for low carbon concrete. Up till now, like the amount of CO2 that could be taken by crushing concrete at the end of the lifetime is not certain, and that's why it's not yet included in the emission inventory of the UN FCCC. Why? Because we don't have harmonized life cycle analysis for this process, and that's on the civil society part, the research institution, and the companies part. We need to work together on harmonizing these methodologies so that we have a clear definition for what is a low carbon concrete. For sure, now we have the only reference we have is the ordinary or the conventional concrete, and we can compare to that of the ordinary cement, but that wouldn't be enough in order to get a large market share for low carbon concrete, like at least for the precast, which we have seen more interest or more applications when it comes to like concrete curing or carbon curing to concrete, and the precast concrete is not a small market share. It's like 40% of the global market. So clear definition, clear methodologies around the overall emissions when it comes to low carbon concrete will be really important in order to push this product to the market and allow companies and governments to get on board with these type of projects. I will stop here, and I'm happy to take any questions afterwards.
Thank you, Mahmoud, for emphasizing the rightly interventions needed in terms of cost, technologies, and for adoption of these technologies and options to move towards the greener fuels. Now, I would like to ask question to Mr. Aftab Khan, who is the DGMP and O National Productivity Organization. Sir, can you briefly give your interventions on this topic of cement decarbonization, that how efficiency is linked to productivity of industrial sector in Pakistan?
Thank you very much, and I think it is very important topic. With the permission of Chair, I would like to mention some points regarding the productivity. So, like the previous colleagues from abroad mentioned that there are some low-hanging fruits. So I think the process improvement, one is the technology. There is 4 M's. The other is material. The other is methodology. And for that, money is also important. So to our experience in different industry, so if we initiate with the process improvement, method improvement, along with the like our colleague mentioned, the awareness of the human resource. So it is very much important to first focus on the process improvement and method study, that how we are using in-house material. So the productivity is linked with the output per unit, output per input. So productivity in force to reduce this input. But we are not going to, in this case, to suffer, to damage our production lines. So I think productivity, if you include all the inputs, energy is one of them. Material is the second, is very much important. Like our colleagues said, mentioned that 55% is coming from the process and 45 for the from the energy. So energy, the low-hanging fruit is energy conservation. Like you can go for the equipment utilization. And this equipment utilization, if you further go down a deep study, you will find that it is totally related with the human resource skills. In textile, our colleagues mentioned that even they have a high-tech technology, but if the manpower is not of the same level, the skills are not the same level, so they will not utilize the capacity of that machine. So alternately, you are using the same energy against the less output. If you use the same input with the higher output, then it's been the carbon emission per unit product will reduce. So that is very simple and very effective approach as per our previous recent study. Say up to 16% of the productivity you can increase in the same premises. If you calculate in terms of, if you need, if you want to expand your business up to 16%, you have to build your building, you have to make some different arrangement, you have to buy some machinery. For that you have to install powerhouses, or you have to get some energy from outside. So but if you go to productivity, then you will be able to utilize the existing resources with higher output. So it is very much. The other is the, what is the impact, like our colleague said, that on the supply chain. So it will also reduce your demand of the raw material, transportation cost, delivery means from the field to the industry. So I think it is also maybe the SDPI may also work on this, that how we can link the productivity with the specific decarbonization. So, and the other is like the SDGs. So we also need to achieve to decide that which tools are most effective. Like we have another concept of green productivity, mean productivity with the environment. So you are looking, we need to look on productivity with the environment. We have go side by side. For that, we have a very effective tool, material flow cost accounting. And through that, if you study the Japanese studies, up to 30% of the resource, 20%, 30% as per the capacity of the, they are able to reduce their, improve their productivity. So it is very much important to also work on the aspects of productivity as well. So energy productivity means the input also includes the energy. So less energy against the higher output if you increase the productivity. So this, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for the useful interventions. Now, I will request panel chair, Dr. Sardar Mausam, who is the Managing Director, National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, to please conclude the session. And after that, I would request Sir Ahad Nazir, Mr. Ahad Nazir, for the conclusion. Over to you, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, SDPI team. for inviting me today and there's such a wonderful event. I think especially the CBI and the team who is currently working on the industrial decarbonization, this is where we have already started working in Pakistan last year, and I think this is almost an exercise to be in completion. I think there are some important aspects, especially from the government standpoint of view, and I think on behalf of government, we can see that what are the efforts that government of Pakistan is considering, especially when it comes to the decarbonization. And after submission of the NDCs, I think this becomes very important that to fulfill our commitments that we have submitted and how we can achieve these NDCs in the specified time period. I think there are different initiatives, and National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority taking a lead on it has been already addressing this problem from especially two perspectives, that whatever is being done will be definitely to reduce or decoupling the energy consumption in the sector. And whatever the reduction it will be, that will be definitely leading to the decarbonization or reduction in CO2 emissions. I think especially when it comes to the industry, the priority, or especially in terms of the overall energy consumption in the country, after domestic consumers, industry is one of the key area where we see a lot more consumption of energy from the multiple sources, either it's coal, either it's natural gas, either it's electricity or other sources, renewables as well. And I think this recently we have seen this phenomenon that earlier when there was this debate of energy efficiency going on in the industry, there was little bit of reluctance to go into that side, and people are more sort of looking for subsidies and tariffs and, you know, the kind of support coming from the government. But I think especially with the recent changes in the electricity tariff, changes in the gas, which are tariff, which are expected, some have already been done. And overall exchange rate fluctuation has impacted a lot. And I think this is where we see that the people are realizing the importance, which definitely leads us towards the decarbonization, is where the price points plays important role. The economics of energy and energy efficiency comes into in its effectiveness when we look into that. So it may be energy security comes at the top priority, but at the same time, when you look at the pricing and some of these aspects, that plays a very important role in that. So I think this is where we are heading, and I think there are a number of things going on in the industry as industry itself shifting towards the renewables. A lot of the, you know, waste heat exchangers and other technologies are being adopted. And I think one of the challenge which we still face or we see, and I think recently we have developed this energy auditors and managers program, and that has been recently approved. It has been a very extensive effort. I think there is a very important aspect that has been just discussed, which is being already, I've been discussing with few colleagues in India and other countries, such as the program of the perform, achieve, and trade. I think we have already developed the designated consumers regime, and we are coming up with the rules for that. And we are setting up a very important regime in Pakistan where we are all the industries, we will set the benchmarks for them. And then the energy audits and how we will be going to use this whole trained experts, especially as energy auditors and managers in Pakistan, to follow up on the designated consumers on these benchmarks and how we can take it forward from there. So I think this is something very important, because in terms of overall decarbonization mandate, one side definitely is that how effective regulations are reducing the red tape barrier that we can bring into force in the regulatory regime or in the regulations or in the laws. But I think it is also important that how we can sort of set the right direction, that where the markets, where the industry, where the different stakeholders gets into the right policy direction and the right signaling for the market. There is also very important aspect that energy saving certificates and these kind of mechanisms, energy conservation bond, we are working on them. And I think given the current situation, I hope that we need some time to develop them, and definitely we will be launching them soon. So it's something that I think we are not in this compared to our neighboring countries where they are and compared to where we are. I think still there's a lot work needs to be done, and I think to prepare us. But I think the good thing is that we are learning from their experience. Some of the mistakes, some of these things they've already done and not successful. I think in terms of our design, the work we are doing at different levels, we are already incorporating their learning, and then we are improving from that. So I think this is where we feel and understand that there are different aspects, as my colleague from productivity organization also mentioned, that this is also the skills which are needed. This is not just the machinery or the equipment. So I think this is also an important thing, like it's multi-pronged approach towards the decarbonization. And I think the cement sector currently, where we see, has more potential, and a lot more can be done in that sector as well. So I think we look forward working together, and whatever this, they are one of the designated consumers. We're definitely working closely with them, and we will look for the options where we can collaborate and sort of build a model, a prototype, and then go forward with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On behalf of SDPI, this is Ahad Nazir. I'm heading the Center for Private Sector Engagement, and I would like to conclude this session now by thanking Dr. Sardar Muazzam, Aftab Saab from National Productivity Organization. We were supposed to be joined by Abdur Rahman Saab, who is MD PICA, but unfortunately he could not join us. But we had very good participation from the private sector in the form of Sayyid Farooq Ahmed Saab, and then Sayyid Fawad Hussain Sahab, Talha Farooq, then Deepak Krishnan giving us a very good international exposure as well, and Mahmood Saab also for his both technical and policy insights. So the cement sector personally is very close to my heart for one of the reasons that I started my career from the cement sector, and so I was part of the first waste recovery system that was installed in 2009. I was part of the team then. So I think this is very important that we focus all our efforts on it. The main agenda behind this meeting was to collect these inputs, and we will be converting them into a policy paper, and then the team will be getting back to you again with a similar sort of a consultation at the end of this research work. So I'd like to thank all the people that have joined us online as well. And of course, I would also like to thank the team, Saleha for excellent moderation, and Ubaid for the presentation, and all the logistics team, the SCTV team, advocacy team, and the IT team, of course. So thank you, and tea is served. Please feel free to join us for that. Thank you very much. Just one more announcement. So we will be having a session on power wheeling at 12. So if anyone of you will like to join, you're most welcome. Thank you.